welcome to How to Win the Lottery Season 7 graphic content. Our second author interview with us today, author of The Seeds, Ann Nocenti. Hello, Ann.
Hello.
I got very excited looking at both the book and then exploring your backstory because I have a journalism degree, and so I always get very excited when journalism is included in stories. And I just love journalism being such a central part in this, and I love the theme, and I love that being a part of. So I guess I don't really have a specific question to kick things off, which I guess is a terrible tactic. But was when you set out to write The Seeds, was journalism something? Because I know that you're interested, passionate, you have a history there. Was that something that you decided to build the story around, or did that just become? I guess where did the idea for The Seeds come from?
Well, the way I tend to work is, I'll have like a couple obsessions rolling around in my head, and I love newsrooms, and I love, I've worked at many magazines. I had a film magazine, Scenario, for many years, and I've done a lot of journalism. So I had once written this goofy play. It was this series called the 24-Hour Plays, and you basically showed up at the theater at midnight and had 24 hours to, or no, I think it was 8, because it was 24 hours and then the curtain rose at 8.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And the idea was you don't come with a preconceived idea at all. And, I know newsrooms pretty well. So I just thought, well, let me do a play about, this was like in the 90s. So I thought, let me do a play about like a tabloid newsroom where people are coming in and pitching their boss like, I don't know, we haven't covered Bigfoot in a while, and I got a couple of stories. And so it came out of that, and the original version of The Seeds was called Scoop. And it was about a newspaper, a tabloid newspaper, where Astra is kind of trying to field spooky stories, It was kind of a spoof on those early tabloids like Bat Boy, all that stuff. So
we love Bat Boy.
I love all that stuff. So, and it was really about the shenanigans of a newsroom. And David Aja came up with this beautiful graphic style. Like, we decided to make the actual comic like a tabloid. And so you would have that kind of resonance of, is it real? Is it not real? And this was so long ago that it was like, I think 2016, something like that. And then basically the rise of fake news. It was just when people started talking about fake news. And I just was talking to Karen Berger, the editor, and David Aja, and it was just kind of like, I don't think we can do this story right now, because it's as if we're commenting on the times when we really weren't commenting on the times. We were commenting on like the 50s, 60s, when the tabloid was king. And so we decided to redo the whole plot, keep the newsroom, and I don't know how it happened, but I think because there was a level of chasing in the first version, there was a level of someone actually chasing down an alien. And then I just said, well, let's just keep that one element and make it real, and it just evolved out of there. And then, and this is like sort of a good tip for young writers. It's like you need a certain amount of like tension of various things. And so I had a lot of beekeeper friends, and my beekeeper friends were all talking back then about how the bees were leaving.
Yeah.
And it was also that moment when we all started to realize we're a little too addicted to our phones. So I think that it was sort of 3 things from 2016 when I started working on it that just all converged. And then we were a book that was interrupted by the pandemic. So
Sure.
we got the first one we got out in 2019, and
Hmm.
then or 2018, and we got two out, and then the pandemic hit. And so it went straight to a graphic novel because we just gave up on the idea of doing a serial comic because there were paper shortages and printing problems and all kinds of stuff. So
Oh, but the original idea for this was going to be like an ongoing, as opposed to the contained of the four
no,
issue. It was
it
going
was
to.
always going to
Oh, it's
be.
okay.
Yeah. Well, actually, I mean, who knows? The idea was four issues, but the idea was to design it as if it was a graphic novel.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And it was right at that point when people were doing four issues and turning them into graphic novels. And then the idea to skip straight to a graphic novel made more sense,
Sure.
actually, because the four issue thing, you have to constantly reestablish the basics for new readers and have a cliffhanger. And that rhythm is not the same rhythm as just a straight up 80-page graphic
Sure.
novel. So yeah, so that was kind of the learning process. And the book is done really well. I mean, we're translated into French, Spanish, Italian, and now Portuguese. I mean, we'd love to be translated into Japanese but we'll see.
I love what you're saying about the change of the content of it based on the times a little bit, because Joey and I are both like, we're both big fans of the X-Files, and when the X-Files came back in the reboot, and it's all about like the conspiracy theory and about vaccines, it was like a lot less fun.
Mm,
Because it wasn't like the conspiracy theories of the 90s, the Bat Boys and that stuff is a lot more fun than the conspiracy theories of now.
yeah.
So that transition from like your tabloid stuff to right now, which is like a much more in the moment commentary and cynical take on news and stuff like that, feels like a very it feels like the right way to do this kind of story to me, if that
Yeah,
makes
it's
sense.
interesting you should say that. It's almost like fake news has ruined fake news.
Yes, yeah, for sure.
It's like, it's kind of a pain in the neck to have to. I mean, I have become, and this gets back to when I was getting my master's at Columbia University in international affairs, and I met a Polish journalist, and she said to me way back then, which would have been like 1990. She said, uh, in Poland, we're used to nothing in the newspaper being real.
Oh, wow.
And he said, you assume everything in your newspapers are real because you have this thing you think is free press. And she said, you don't know how to read between the lines, and you don't know how. And it always stuck with me, that
Yeah.
comment. And then it really came back in the past few years when I'm like, yeah, Joanne was not only right, but it's like now we've got to retrain our eyes, because every video, every photo, everything can be fake. And you've got to retrain your eyes to look at. People are always sending me links to this or that, and it's as a journalist and a researcher, it's not that hard to dig deeper and
Hmm.
find
Yeah.
out whether or not something's real. But it's become kind of a pain in the neck. Like every photo, you're like, well, I have
Yeah.
no idea if that's a fake photo or not.
Because I remember growing up in the 90s, and like, today with AI and everything, and not even deepfakes, but just like computer generated everything, like you don't know what's real, like you're saying. But I remember growing up and seeing Bat Boy at the grocery store, like on Fox, like watching Alien Autopsy, and be like, how could it not, like, how could they put it on TV if it's not real? And then you don't realize it
Yeah.
just meant it's entertainment. Like it's a very like mind bending, earth shattering kind of thing for like a 6-year-old in 1994 or whatever to be like, wait, you can just make things up and pretend it's news? Like, it's wild.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I really wanted to do was have a certain amount of
Mm-hmm.
respect for people who do believe that they have seen aliens or they've been abducted. I mean, the kind of psychological science on it is, those kind of abduction experiences are blocking something
Hmm.
bad that actually happened to
Mm-hmm.
you. And at the same time, so I wanted to do these sort of four scenes that were, we have the alien con, which was really fun to do because it was like a Comic Con,
Yeah, yeah,
only
yeah.
for aliens. And of course, our alien could walk through it and no one would know that he was there. And then the AA meeting, which was, instead of Alcoholics Anonymous, it was Alien
Mm-hmm.
Anonymous. And that scene was really fun, really fun. And David Aha came up with the idea of the bands over the eyes, like a little bit of a, kind of like, this is secret, I don't really talk in public about it. And we were able to sort of, and then we got to do the autopsy, which is obviously the, call out to the
Sure.
B
Yeah, yeah.
movies. And so each alien scene was really fun. And the last one, when he just wanders off into the crowd, was definitely, I was thinking of that last scene in Silence of the Lambs when, the someone, wanders off into the
Yeah,
crowd
yeah,
to.
Hannibal Lecter.
So we had a lot of fun with the alien stuff for sure. And one of the really fun things was, then the other, we're all used to, oh, there's an alien in this
Mm-hmm.
story. That's kind of like in sci-fi culture, it's kind of common. But I met a woman at some point who said, I wrote my thesis about um, binary aliens in sci-fi, of which apparently there's very few examples of. And she was very excited that there was an example of it in a comic, because we allude to the fact that perhaps race, the alien that has the love
Mm-hmm.
affair, has both
Hmm.
genders. And she said, wow, that's never been in a comic before. And I was like, oh, cool. It wasn't intentional to be the first of that.
One thing that I really liked about it, I think we talked about a little bit on the episode, is that for a story that's about aliens and like that maybe the Earth is ending and they're cataloging things and you never really know exactly why, which I like about it, but it just kind of winds up being like a grounded sort of love story that like ends kind of in an optimistic way. And there's something very special about taking these like supernatural, fantastical elements and being like, no, it just kind of it's a love story. It's just that the guy or whatever the one of the partners is an alien.
Well, and I think that, that was specific. That was sort of like our way of saying, we live in these troubled
Mm-hmm.
times where everybody seems to hate each other, if they look different, and everybody's afraid of people that look different or whatever, and the woke, anti-woke,
Sure.
stuff. So that was specific to say, two different races. But it was also, a lot of my young friends literally say things to me like, why have kids,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sure.
because the planet's dead. And I just did a couple books for Marvel Comics, and in one of them I did a 5-issue Captain Marvel thing, which is going to have a trade paperback soon. But it's basically, in that, I was able to have this group of young kids that were just like talking to Captain Marvel in that kind of way that young kids talk to
Mm-hmm.
me, which is, you left us with nothing.
Yeah.
We can't afford rent, we can't afford college, and you're killing the planet. And so we wanted we wanted the seeds to have a hopeful ending, because even if things have to get worse before they get better, eventually there will be pockets of the planet left where humanity will restart.
For sure.
If this swath is burning and this swath is flooding, And, to bring it to something topical, we have just had this hurricane that in Acapulco, I guess, is the main target. It hit, that went from 50 miles an hour to
Mm-hmm.
165
Mm-hmm.
miles an hour within a few hours. And that is a first.
Yeah.
Like it, yeah, on all. I mean, I'm not a scientist, so I could be wrong about a lot of this, but I was reading about how it's in since they've been recording meteorological
Yeah.
events. This was the first time a hurricane escalated that fast, that strong, and that targeted. Um, and then it's sort of like that's a game changer, because now what do you do? If you can't even track hurricanes, the escalation of a hurricane, how do you evacuate a
Right.
place? Do you evacuate everywhere because they might escalate? No, because that's expensive. So there are certain like firsts that are happening now. The ice caps melt, and this is all very depressing stuff. But what we wanted to do in the seeds was to say, you know what, if humans are a virus, the beekeeper even says something like that, that humans are a virus and the planet's trying to shake off
Mm-hmm.
humans, or shake us up to the point where we stop doing what we're doing. You're still going to have pockets, and that's what the arc is, obviously. A bit on the nose metaphor, but the big boat that they get in, and that's basically saying, we're going to keep. So we didn't want it to be a total
No, and I
dystopia.
think it's easy to be pessimistic, but I think it's more difficult and also important to be optimistic. Like it's not all for naught, right? Like there's still hope out there. Like you can still save something, even if it doesn't look the way that it looks, or people might not be happy or whatever. There's still don't stop trying, right? And I think there's value in the optimism. So I thank you, I guess. Thank you.
Well, and I guess because I'm a sort of a teacher type, I guess I taught film for years, and I've taught, all kinds of stuff. I guess, for young writers out there, it really just to take a bunch of your obsessions and twist them together, and, hang them on the natural, or, buttress of the
Sure.
narrative of a, it's I think that it's important to, if you're going to write, take chances and
Sure.
write exactly what's in your brain that day. Exactly. If you're scared, you know express that. So the seeds in Ruby Falls, thanks to Karen Berger, were the two books that I got to do that weren't superheroes. So they're my favorite books, because there is something about not doing the escalation to a fight
Hmm.
narrative. It is
Mm-hmm.
liberating. It's liberating because I'm working on a new thing for Marvel now, and it's sort of like, I came back to Marvel after doing the graphic novels, The Seeds in Ruby Falls, and did a Storm series and a Captain Marvel series. And at first, it was a little odd to come back to that. Oh yeah, there's got to be, at least half the comic has to be
Mm-hmm.
action,
Yeah.
in an action adventure medium. So it's a narrative that is fun, but at the same time, it kind of keeps a real story from
Right.
developing, because you have to escalate into action.
Yeah, it's also it asks you to solve most problems through punching, which is
Yeah,
not necessarily the way that we. I mean, I'm a long. I mean, I've loved comics since I was a little kid. I love superhero comics. I love everything. But like, yeah, politically, it's difficult to move outside of a message that is. I don't want to say essentially pro violence, but it does ask you to solve problems through hitting rather than other like maybe more constructive methods of problem solving.
yeah, and it's the action adventure medium is got its purpose,
Hmm.
escapism. I learned that a lot about, when I was teaching film in Haiti, and there's so many problems in Haiti that at some point I realized, in talking to my students, they didn't necessarily want to make movies about how sad and problematic their culture
Right.
was. They wanted to make adventures and comedies, and they wanted to make things that relieve people of the daily burden of their life. So, I really understand the rise of the action adventure comic, especially during, you know, right after World War II, with the punch, Captain America punching Hitler was his first act. And, that puts everything into
Right.
perspective as to why that form rose the way it
Yeah,
did.
it gives us an idea that problems can be solved, right? Rather than this like Adam Curtis O'Dearism idea of this immensely complex society where like even if you solve one problem, that problem tends to cause other problems in other areas that you then have to go back and solve.
Oh, you mean the filmmaker that does those Adam
Yes, yeah,
Curtis's
yeah, yeah.
documentaries? Yeah, yeah, I love
He's great.
him, but I love his work. He's great. I can watch his documentaries over and over and over. But you're right. It's just like and I'm pretty sure he's a great
Hmm.
researcher. I'm pretty sure. Like I've paused and said, "Oh, let me fact check that," And he's pretty on the
Yeah.
money. He does it's and so it is. His films are kind of
Hmm.
devastating. You're right, because sort of like it's so it's so it's eons. It's eons of true conspiracy
Yeah.
theory. you know so you feel a little bit devastated. He doesn't give much hope, does
Right,
he?
which is like I mean, especially like you were talking about Captain Marvel, like those characters, specifically Captain Marvel and characters like that, really like exist in a very hopeful place, right? We look to them for things like hope.
Yeah, the Captain Marvel series I just did, even though there's these kids that push back on her, like, how do you get up every day and keep going when there's nothing, So, and that is her narrative. Her narrative is to keep getting
Right.
up. It's almost like a Spider-Man, Hulk, the narratives of, let's get up and lift this rock. I even did a kind of a Sisyphus storyline, that where we literally reference Sisyphus, and we literally have a big thing to try to roll up a hill. And it's like, because that's what those narratives are, at the Sisyphusian, like, you got to get up every day and keep
Yeah.
going.
Yeah, there's definitely I love that that can exist alongside something that is something that hopeful like that can exist alongside something that is asking us to do a lot more complex morally and narratively that is you find more in independent comics like what you're doing with the seeds
Yeah,
and other
and,
stuff.
and that's also why the Seeds was such a pleasure, because we could break down the storytelling in the way that, like, David Aha decided he wanted to do the 9 panel page,
Right.
which has this history
Hmm.
of, I mean, I love examples of the Gasoline Alley, which would have like 12 panel
Sure.
pages, or you go back, because it's thinking of the page as a painting, and thinking of the page as a piece of music, almost, where your eye, a very lyrical way, your eye is. And with Gasoline Alley, famously, he used to have like one story and break it down into 10, and your eye had to move around in a way. And Little Nemo, and there are all these comics going way back that did this kind of stuff. And so, and then, of course, famously,
Hmm.
Watchman was a 9 panel grid. And, so David Aho was able to play with that. And every single panel is perfectly designed to fit into the page, where even like a branch leads your eye
Hmm.
so that you look at bird, and then that has something in it. And it's always the center panel is like the the power center of each page, which I used to start thinking of it like when you play chess and you have to always control
Yeah,
the
control
center,
the middle.
you know. And he really has this lyrical ability to just design each page so that it's all subliminal. Your eyeball is going exactly where David Aja wants your eyeball to go,
Yeah,
you
he
know.
is. I he is maybe my favorite artist working in comics right now. He's incredible. So what is that? What's that collaboration with him like? And I'm thinking specifically about the choices on color and things like that, and making it so sort of not bleak, but it is like, it's not a colorful book.
No, and that was, I always, the artist, that's their
Mm-hmm.
domain, it's sort of like, I think when the book was Scoop, I was thinking of a black and white and some red or some color, like we were thinking black and white with touches of other color. And then when we reinvented the thing as Seeds, it was David's decision to do the 9 panel grid and the color and the play with the duotone dots and
Yeah.
the and but it was a kind of, because he's in Spain and I'm in New York and the time difference is ridiculous, likely hard
Mm-hmm.
to, we worked by
Mm-hmm.
email. And I would, we were both very interested in repeating graphics. So obviously the maze, the hexagon, and I mean, literally, I did Google searches to find every single hexagon I could, and then would design a page like, here's a turtle, because a turtle has hexagon shells, and the plastic that stuck to him is a beer,
Yeah.
a beer plastic thing, which happens to have hexagons. And then I would sort of get all this photo reference together and then design always usually a 4 panel page so that David had the ability to break it down however he wanted into the grid. And so, and I find that that's in general how I work, because if you give an artist a 4 panel page, they can decide what they want to focus on. If it's a punch, do they want to show the moment you grip, the moment,
Yeah.
if for a super action book. But you can also combine panels and pull out a big panel. So I think it gives the artists a lot of storytelling room to play in if you don't overload them. I mean, at the beginning of my career, I famously started my career with Longshot, which was a ridiculously dense
Yeah.
book that, drove Arthur Adams crazy. It was like, because, in the big, back then, you're just so scared of like not giving people their money's worth or boring people. And so you want to like, cram as much as you can in. It was very kind of we were just kids for one thing. We were both like, I don't know, Arthur must have been like 17
Oh
and I
wow.
was like 20,
All right.
something like that. I don't really even remember, but that was like, and so the older the you realize eventually is that it's more about stripping
Hmm.
stuff out than cramming things in.
Well, you're in
So
good company here. We just did. I don't know if you know the book Asterios Polyp by David Mazzucchelli, but the actual cover, like the dust jacket, is smaller than the bigger thing, and he said he did it explicitly because he wanted something as difficult as possible to create. And we're like, we love that. Like there's something fun about being annoying about making, not intentionally so, whatever, but just like, I'm going to design something very difficult on purpose. So I mean, we love that.
yeah, and I think that a little bit of that happened with David. Like once, he meant for it, I think, to be green because it was an ecology book really,
Right.
but
Yeah.
green for alien, green for nature, green for a little bit of maybe sickening
Hmm.
thing, and then the 9 panel grid because he wanted it to be claustrophobic, like one of like the claustrophobia of today. And the David Mazzucchelli book, that's a
Yeah.
masterpiece. I
Sure
love
is.
that book.
Yeah.
I only got to work with him once, and we did a short angel story, which was in Marvel Fanfare long time ago. And the idea with that was just my grandmother. Remember, I was at my grandmother's house, and the news coming out of the television was all so scary, and she didn't like to leave the
Hmm.
house.
Yeah.
And so it was like that was the setup. My grandmother afraid to leave the house because the news was like, sensationalizing, and making everything seem scary. And then the angel, who's one of the X-Men, was just in some battle way up in the sky and fell and landed in her backyard. So to her, he was one of God's
Hmm.
angels. And she had to run around in the yard and gather all the feathers that had fallen and glue them back onto Angel. And I don't think I had him, he was recuperating from a battle, and he never says a word in the story, but he revitalizes this lady so that she can go out. But it was also, Warren Worthington
Yeah.
III was a rich, arrogant, you know, character, but he's in the image of an angel. So that story was just from the perspective of what if someone saw him as a real angel. And David Mazzucchelli, just, it's such a beautiful, he did it's like 10 pages of pure storytelling
I'm gonna go
joy.
find it. I'm gonna find that story and read it.
That working with David Mazzucchelli and David Aha, they're both masters. So, of storytelling masters. So when that happens, that's like your career peaks, because it's like you've worked with the best,
I'm
you
sure
know.
it's a question you've answered probably a lot of times, but how did you meet David Ahad? Was the idea for the seed something you guys developed together, or was it one of your ideas that the other you brought to the other? Like, what's your working
I
history
mean,
with
it was
him?
we had done a short Daredevil
Hmm.
story, which was wonderful. It was a bullseye story, and it was the first time I had worked with David, and he just did this amazing. There were fireworks in it,
Hmm. Hmm.
firecrackers, and he just did his thing where he turned a simple mundane visual thing, which he did with the hexagons and the seeds too, and he turned it into a piece of music, like a rhythmic thing that flows through the narrative. And so we had enjoyed working together, and then he just called me one day and was like, "What are you up to? What do you have?" Or he emailed me or something. And I told him, well, I would wanted to do this thing that was, I think I sent him a couple ideas that he didn't like. And then I had this thing I was working on, like that had been a
Yeah.
play. And I was working on it, kind of thinking of it as a play or a screenplay, and sent him that, adding in things like things that were bothering me, like the bees leaving, and also the my relationship with animals. My grandfather was a farmer, and we live in an age now where it's people are kind of very aware that it's probably we should stop eating, especially red
Hmm.
meat. So there was that, and it's just like having a few obsessions, and clicked on an idea that he liked. And and then also, we both had our attachments to our
Sure.
phones, and what if there was a place where you could just throw your phones away? That's where the zone came from. And it was funny, I had called it the zone, like zoning
Hmm.
out, like, or in the zone. I was thinking in terms of like writer terms, like I'm zoning out, or I'm in the zone and I'm writing. And he instantly thought of Tarkovsky's
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Stalker,
Yeah.
which was not what I was thinking about
Well,
at
but
all.
that lends some of the visual, because that has the same like sepia toning to it. Yeah, that's
Exactly.
great.
And
I
so
never would have
I
put that
think,
together.
yeah, so like something I was interested in just coincided with one of his obsessions, which was Tarkovsky movies. And that's literally how that happened. He just went, oh, the zone, the zone from, and of course I knew what
Yeah.
he was talking about, but I hadn't seen that movie in so long. And so that sort of got rolled in. So it was a very natural, organic process of me rolling something in, David rolling something in. And, you know, the fact that he loved the whole hexagon thing was great because, that's up to the artist. I always give like visual reference, visual
Hmm.
ideas, but make it clear like, if this is feels stupid to you, don't do it. And luckily he got into it. And I mean, I love how he eventually designed the bee to have an alien in, I don't know if even people notice that, but if you look at the bee, it's got an alien on its back.
I'll go back and look at that. I I didn't pick it up. No.
No, it's right on the cover. If you just look at the cover, there's the maze with the hexagon, and then the bee has an alien uh, in it. Yeah, here, I'll just put it up
Oh
like
yeah. Oh, look
that.
at that.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Beautiful. A
That's
little.
so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Use of the negative space there.
So the comic is filled with things like that. And often, I don't even know until like there's a page. He was interested in having a Schrodinger's cat kind of
Hmm.
thing, but I had done a bunch of Schrodinger cat comic stories before, so I was like, oh, I don't know about this. But then he ended up doing it on a page with rings of rain and a cat that I think was an allusion to a Joker story
Oh.
where it's maybe true, maybe not
Yeah.
true. I'm not really sure. You'd have to ask David about that. But I remember when the page came in, I was kind of like, oh, that reminds me of the end of The Killing Joke, where did it happen? Did it not happen? You know? So I think there's a lot of like stuff layered into the seeds that you don't really see on the first read, maybe the second
It's
read,
definitely a rereader. Yeah. There's definitely and yeah, there's a lot of joy in going back and reading something as complex multiple times.
And
For sure.
I think something that we have admitted that we're not doing as well is that this is the first, this is our 7th season of the show, but the first time we're doing graphic novels as opposed to just, just plain text. And I think sometimes we almost like forget to like comment on the art, but here, especially how much Bob loves David Aha, we definitely talked about it, but there's something that like, it's such a different experience that you could just like flip through this even without reading the words and just take it in all visually. And there's something so rewarding about different ways to read it. And I can't wait to like go back and just like look at, what else he layered in there, because I think it's so exciting. With The Killing Joke and with Stalker in mind, one thing that we like to ask the people we interview is if people read and love the seeds and want to explore more stuff that either influenced it or is similar. There's we've talked about like doing a lot of like an eco module on here, all about like books about the environment and, stuff like Richard Powers' The Overstory. Are there things that either inspired this or you love or are in the field of the seeds that people should go out, either whether they're books or graphic novels or movies or anything? Like if people love this, where would you send them next?
There's a in the back of the graphic novel. There's a both David and I wrote about to a bit about our influences, and for me, it's definitely was Rachel Carson's Silent
Hmm.
Spring, which was published, I don't know, late 50s or something. I
Yeah.
don't know. I forget. But it's when I remember as a kid, it was just like this whole concept of acid rain was so weird. It was like the rain burns, and it's sort of like was a bit of an awakening for kids of my generation. I read the book, I'm like I was raised in the
Mm-hmm.
60s when the whole environmental movement and back to nature and all that stuff was happening, and that I found Rachel Carson's book and was just like, it really powerfully reminds you how connected everything is. And now, of course, 50 years later or more, we have the same
Yep.
problems. So I guess, yeah, and I mean, Stalker is a beautiful movie to watch. It's slow,
Sure is. Yeah.
so
Gotta have patience with those Tarkovsky movies.
gotta have patience for Tarkovsky, but boy, he's a master,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I read Silent Spring maybe 5 years ago, and it is as harrowing now as I imagine it was back then. Maybe even more so because A, we didn't take our lessons from it, but B, there is now like a counter movement to act or to try to like pick things like that apart to show that it's like not true and blah blah blah, in ways that are I feel really harrowing to me at this moment.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I mean, I think that I don't know what about Silent Spring they're trying to pick apart,
I mean, there's
but
just people out there that your I don't know, typical politicians that want to act
well,
like
we just gotta. The Republicans just elected their speaker who doesn't believe in climate
yeah, it's a big
change.
thing for them. Yeah.
And he's like, I mean, how? But that brings to the sense, and Susan, the beekeeper and the seeds, talks about this, that there might be something wrong with humanity itself in a sense of we were, we have self awareness, which people are always talking about these days in terms of AI. The Turing test. As to what the moment if there's ever sentience, which we know is impossible, but mimicking sentience is becoming stranger. But also with animals, they use the mirror test, which dolphins, elephants, only
Yep.
certain animals can recognize themselves in a mirror. But humans, we recognize ourselves, we have consciousness, and yet there is something about us. We are unable to see past our own bubble. And so every day, understandably, people get up and they need to fuel their house and they need to drive their car to get to work and they need to pick up their groceries in plastic bags. And even though all we're drenched in information now about fossil fuels and plastic, but can we stop? It becomes like, is there something in humanity itself where we are just incapable of that much self-sacrifice?
It feels like almost an inherent self-destructiveness to humankind, that is in some ways bolstered by things like we talked a little bit on the episode about like in the Arctic they do have that seed vault that is like where they put all the stuff to make sure that we can repopulate or whatever, but that seems like very few and far between compared to the self-destructiveness of us as a general
Well,
people.
and also the seed vault itself was in danger for a while. I forget why. It's in the Arctic, but the Arctic was, I don't know, melting. And I don't know, there was just a recent, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, the seed vault itself was in danger.
Oh boy.
You
Yeah.
know?
I don't know. I don't know. You try to find some hope and to apply some CPR to all this stuff. But who knows if that works.
I don't know. But Anne, thank you so much for joining us. This was an absolute delight. We thank you so much for giving us your time. If people who are listening to this want to find either new work or find you online, what would you like to plug? Where can people find you? Are there social media platforms that you don't hate?
I have a website, which is annienocenti.com. And a lot of my work is there. The stories I wrote about teaching in Haiti, some of my film work, my film magazine scenario. I have archived that online because that was pre-digital, so we never had
wow.
a website. And so the beauty of that magazine was that I interviewed screenwriters and directors on what changed from the original script to the finished film.
Oh, that's so cool.
In film you shoot, but then you write the whole thing again and when you edit, and so it's really a minutia nuts and bolts of storytelling.
I love that.
So and they're now on my website, so you can read them. And like, so if you have a movie that you love, like Francis Ford Coppola's The Conversation, I interviewed him specifically about that film, and you can just get an incredibly rich, like, down to like Walter Murch's the sounds he took out of Coppola's films. I mean, kind of things like, my favorite example is the moment in The Godfather when Al Pacino, Michael Corleone, takes on the role, is that scene in the restaurant. You hear the screech of the L train, the overground subway, and it's just unnerving. And then they stop translating the Italian, and you're kind of like, why? And you realize that's a cue. Michael Corleone isn't listening anymore,
right?
Because he's not. And then that's when he shoots. And there are so many Coppola films that have that removal of sound. Henry Call in The Conversation, you never hear his footsteps. And it's because he was a kind of a mysterious man whose name is Call, which is a rap. And then you start to realize that all the subliminals that go into storytelling that you don't even really know they're there are how stories move people. It's the stuff you don't see that can have a lot of impact.
That's awesome. I'm very excited to look at it.
I love it. That's so good. Yeah.
Great.
Cool.
Well, thank you so much. This has been a delight. And again, thank you for your time.
Thank you.